and welcome to Fiction Fans, a podcast where we read books and nonfiction too. I'm Lily.
And I'm Sarah, and I am so thrilled that today we are joined by best-selling science author Mary Roach to talk about her latest book, Fuzz, When Nature Breaks the Law.
Hey, hello.
Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, even though I don't write fiction, have never written fiction, and probably never will because I don't have that talent.
Well, that's quite all right. Despite the name, we do not discriminate on this podcast.
Good for you.
Before we start talking about book things, though, let's all kick off with something great that happened lately. Sarah?
Oh, no. Normally, I actually think about this in advance, and I didn't think about this in advance this time. So I don't really have anything particularly good. I was working on a problem at work that had been giving me lots of grief for like a day and a half, and I fixed it. I figured out what was going wrong. I still have lots of work to do on the issue, but yeah, I was very pleased about that.
See, that's a good thing. Mine is even more trivial.
Oh, it's your great thing.
Okay, so I have this overseas kind of bizarre flight that I have to take. And this airline, it's Turkish Air. They're like, no, we can't let you book a seat. I'm like, this is a really long flight. I don't want to be stuck in the middle. They're like, try tomorrow. So I keep calling Turkish Airlines. And finally today I got this man and he said, yes, no problem. We can book you a seat. And he goes, for free. You can have regular economy or extra legroom, both free. And I said, well, I'd be crazy not to take extra legroom. And I said, sure, put me in extra legroom. He goes, okay. And I said, window. He said, aisle or window. And I said, window. He goes, oh, that is for people traveling with a baby. I said, okay, fine. How about aisle? I'll take aisle in extra legroom. He goes, great. I will put you down 6C. And then he goes, now you are traveling next to person with baby. So I'm like, you know what? Just put me in regular economy.
That's how they get you.
That's how they get you. Yeah.
I would say that's a great thing considering the length of that flight. Not trivial at all.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. That was a close call because I was like, yeah, extra legroom, but yeah, no sleep.
My great thing is slightly borrowed, but it was my husband's birthday this week, which we celebrated mostly through copious amounts of takeout from various worldwide ethnicities. And I've been eating very well, and it's been lovely.
Nice.
I used to try to throw parties for him, and he always says no, and I'm finally learning. I'm growing as a person and not forcing birthday parties on people who don't want them.
That is growth indeed.
Yeah. No, not everybody wants a party. Personally, I think I'd rather have a bunch of delicious ethnic food.
Yeah, I have to agree with you. I don't want to leave the house.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've gotten used to that.
Well, what is everyone drinking this evening? I had great plans for very exciting things and then fell back on green tea.
I am drinking water right now, but I split a beer with my husband and it was a very Mary Roach kind of beer. It was an IPA called Inhume, not Exhume, Inhume. It's because it's made by this local brewery called Ghost Town. So it's sort of thematic with death and ghosts, I guess. Anyway, there's a skeleton on the label. It's a very good IPA.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it feels very appropriate.
Yeah, it's a great label and it's a good beer, a great beer. I'll even say that.
I am drinking Far West Cider Company, which is local. This one in particular is blueberries and Amarillo, and it's good. I like it.
That sounds incredible.
Amarillo, isn't that a city, not a flavor? What's Amarillo?
Hops, I think.
Oh,
I don't actually know. I'm just reading off of the label.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Amarillo, because there was a song, "Show me the way to Amarillo.
I think
Every night I've been hugging my pillow," which is kind of creepy.
Google tells me that there's hops in it, so presumably.
Yeah. So Amarillo must be a hop.
Yeah.
I'll buy that.
It does taste vaguely hoppy.
Hoppy is good. I like hoppy.
Oh, I loved Beer O'Clock at the convention in your book, but we're not there yet. First.
Yeah.
Has anyone read anything good lately?
I have. Yes. I read a book recently, completed a book called Simon the Fiddler. which is by Paulette Giles, who wrote News of the World, which I haven't read, but which I guess was pretty popular. But Simon the Fiddler is wonderful. It takes place right at the end of the Civil War and in the aftermath, when people are kind of wandering around lost with no money, trying to figure out what to do and whose side they're on. But it's a beautiful writing. It's just a really enjoyable novel.
That sounds very interesting. I haven't been reading. Well, that's not true. I've been reading a lot, but it's all been podcast books. So I don't have anything like extra to say for the section. Our May is very busy.
Yeah, I bet you guys have to read a lot of books. How often is the podcast drop?
We release every week. So we generally read about a book a week.
That's a lot.
Yeah. And this month in particular, we are reading
a little bit more than that.
So it's a lot of reading this month.
That's a lot of pressure. Yeah.
Coincidentally, I also have not read anything.
Yes.
So you're reading a lot of books, but they're not books that you're like recommending.
Well, we're gonna talk about them a heck
I
of a
see.
lot.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Right. You haven't read an extracurricular one.
Yeah, they're good books, but we will be having full podcasts on them.
Yeah,
so.
sure. That makes sense. Right. Yeah. I also read The Cold Millions recently, which is Jess Walter's new book. He wrote Beautiful Ruins, which was really good. And then this one, The Cold Million, I liked even better.
What's it about?
The Cold Millions, it's about the people trying to establish labor unions in what country? This was a couple months ago. The Wobblies, the International Workers Union, trying to get that union up and running, and all the violence and counter protests and things. They're just, again, he's a really beautiful writer.
Incredible. Well, thank you for carrying that question for us.
Yeah, no problem.
There's one reader here and it's not the podcasters. All right. We have read Fuzz, which was an incredible book.
Oh, thanks.
And, since you are the expert on animals committing crimes, I was surprised you didn't cover the two that my cats commit the most often, namely kidnapping and vandalism.
Yeah. Kidnapping. Who are they kidnapping?
Me, when I refuse to get up because they're too sweet.
Oh, I see. Okay. Kidnapping. Yes. Yeah. And vandalism. Yes, they do. Mm-hmm. But yes, I've lost many a chair to cats over the years.
The crimes in this book are probably on a larger scale and more impactful to communities.
To communities, yes, exactly. Nobody's going to be knocking on the door with a warrant for the arrest of your cat.
No.
Unless it's you.
Right.
So your introduction to Fuzz talks a little bit about a book called The Criminal Prosecution and Capital Punishment of Animals.
Yes.
From 1906. But I got the impression, and correct me if I'm wrong, I got the impression that you were reading that after having come up with the concept of Fuzz, and you were reading it as research.
Yeah.
I was wondering where you got the idea to write a book about like the intersection of human law and animal life. Like, where did that come from?
Yeah, well, frequently when I am looking for a book topic, I start out in one direction, then I kind of pivot and head off in another direction. I had been thinking about a book that would have to do with the forensics of basically when people commit crimes against animals. There's a whole, the Fish and Wildlife Service has a whole forensics laboratory for identifying bits and pieces of smuggled animals. They have people on cases internationally. And I was kind of looking around there thinking it would be interesting to tag along with some investigator who does this work and various other things related to it. But while I was up at the forensics laboratory talking to a woman who's the foremost expert on identifying real versus fake tiger penis, which is honestly where this whole thing started, with the tiger penis manual, I found out that I couldn't tag along with an investigator on an open case that wasn't legally allowed. Or that's what I was told. So that wouldn't work for me because I need to have access to things happening as they unfold. Mm-hmm. I need to be on the scene. I need to have characters and dialogue and plot, if you will. So that wasn't going to work, despite the entertainingness of the world's foremost expert on identifying counterfeit tiger penis.
Did you learn a little bit about how to identify counterfeit?
Oh, I could absolutely identify. You bring me any penis suspected of being tiger penis, and I will tell you what that is. happily, for the tigers, it's almost always not tiger penis. It's usually a horse or cow or dog or deer. It's often deer because it's cheaper to find these animals than it is to hunt tigers. And also because these other ones, the horse and the deer and the cow, they have much bigger dicks than tigers. Have very small penises for their size. They're really not. And it's being smuggled as a virility enhancer. You make a soup in certain Asian countries that you can get this soup made with tiger penis that's supposed to boost virility, basically for impotence, I think. So they put, the tiger penis in there. So you want something inspiring, you want something like big and virile.
I was going to say, from horse to dog, that feels like a very wide range of possibilities.
Yeah, not so much dog. I misspoke. It's deer and cow and horse. Okay. Yeah, not so much dog, because the dog, again, not a huge dick. Mm-hmm. But the tiger, so the tiger it's not an inspirational penis. So that's the other reason, but mainly because it's just so much easier and cheaper to get deer or cow. But the thing with a tiger penis, of course, this isn't even in the book, and I always end up because people want to know, where'd you get this idea? So I end up spending the first 10 minutes talking about tigers because I secretly really wish I could have that in the book. But also, since cat penises have little, kind of like the things in a rental car driveway, if you back up, mm-hmm. They stick on the tire. So they have kind of barbs that make it harder to pull out. So the people who make the counterfeit penis have to carve little barbs into the deer penis to make it look feline. Anyway, it's a whole situation. It's a whole weird world. Anyway.
Oh, you're right. That is exactly what I wanted to hear for the first 10 minutes, even though it's not the topic of the book at all.
Yeah. So and I have lots of pictures on my phone of different dried animal penises. And every now and then, like my granddaughter would be like, "Oh, I want to look through your pictures." I'm like, no. I don't think so. Because, she'll be like, she's 8 and she'll be like, "What's that?" There'll be a lot of questions. Not that an 8-year-old shouldn't see dried animal penises, but it's just a little hard to explain why they're on my phone, why I needed to take pictures.
This book is organized into sections of different animals and different
crimes
that they commit.
With quotes, yes.
Yes. Humanly defined crimes.
Exactly.
And I was wondering about sort of the chronology. Did you write it in the order that it appears? I can't imagine that you managed to get all of your on-site research in the right order. That seems...
Oh, heck no.
Yeah.
Yeah, no. Wherever I can get access... usually I'm trying to cover something that's happening at a set time often. So I have no real power over when I'm going to report. And I like to write a chapter when I have enough material to start writing. I like to do that. I don't like to leave it. I'm not one of those people who does all the research and then starts writing. I know that people do that. And I think if you have a narrative through line that's one chronology, you really have to do all your research first in order to know how to pace things and how much time to spend on each section and each scene. But I'm not tied to that chronology. So I tend to be writing as I go. I'll say I have 2 or 3 chapters written and 10 more to report. I'm doing both at the same time. That means that I don't really know where each chapter is going to fall in the book. So I may, I'm shuffling things around a fair amount, which means some rewriting to make the end of one chapter kind of set up the next one because I've just changed the next one. So, it's maybe not ideal, but that's the only way I can do it. I can't. The idea of having 15 chapters, just all this huge, massive research, and then trying to figure out how to write it, that doesn't work for me. So
I feel like that would be kind of intimidating.
Oh, yeah, I know. I mean, Susan Orlean told me she does that with her books because there is more of a storyline through, a more distinct chronology with characters that are present throughout the book. So I believe she told me she did 7 years of research before she started writing. How would you even remember what the hell you were referring to in this material that has been in a pile for 7 years? I don't know.
I can barely remember what's going on like 2 weeks past. So even if I take notes.
Oh, same here. I like to try to do it while it's relatively fresh in my head, for sure.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What is involved in researching a book like Fuzz? Like, how do you find people to interview or to shadow? Do you just cold call them essentially, or?
I cold email them. Yeah, I used to back in the day when I was writing magazine articles, you had to cold call. And now I look back on that and I think that was barbaric. You just have to call some stranger and go, "Oh, hi, you don't know me. I'm a reporter and I'm trying to do this book and this is what I'm thinking of doing. And don't hang up." So now at least with email, I can set forth calmly what I'm doing, what the book's about. And then I can put my bio at the bottom so they see that I'm legitimate with links and everything. But yes, I do a lot of just emailing strangers, and not to say immediately, "Oh, I'd like to write a chapter about you," because I don't yet know if I do. So I'm kind of just vetting them in a way. I'm kind of saying, "So what are you going to be up to for the next couple of years? Is there something?" I'm very straightforward about, I need a scene. I need to come be part of something. I need to see something. I'm not looking for your PowerPoint. I'm not looking for a phone interview. I'm really looking to come and be a pest for 1 or 2 days at least. And what do you got going on? Does this appeal to you at all? Would you like me to send you a book? What do you need from me to say yes or no? So I do a lot of that. And sometimes people don't reply. And sometimes it's gotten easier because more people are familiar with my work. And in that case, it just saves me a lot of time. If somebody writes back and goes, "Oh, I love your work. That sounds great." Not only do I know they're okay with the kind of writing that I do, but also they're going to understand I need some kind of scene. I need to throw myself into a situation or at least be a fly on the wall. So that makes it a lot easier.
Are you finding people through research papers they've written or?
Yeah, mostly. And once you visit one person, you often learn of somebody else. I kind of ask, once this person that I'm interviewing and spending time with knows what I'm trying to do, I'll ask them, "Can you think of other people who would be good to cover or to include?" So a lot of times it's references from somebody else that I've met. Sometimes I go back to people in previous books who are in related fields and say, "Does anything come to mind? What do you know?" I find people to be the best resource. Things that are on the internet in any easy to access way tend to have been written about already. So, but that's not, there's plenty of little pockets on the internet that haven't been seen by 99% of the population. But I do like when I hear about something through somebody that I'm talking to for the book already. That's hugely helpful. And that happens a lot. Someone will say, "Oh, you need to talk to this person," or "You need to go here." So people tend to be my best resource.
Have you had any memorable reactions to your introductory emails, or is it usually radio silence?
I'm trying to think if anybody's written back and said, "That sounds horrible. Please never write to me again." No, and I'm pretty persistent. If I don't hear, I wait a week and then I write back, "Just checking to make sure you got, that annoying email. Just checking to see if you got this. I know sometimes, or maybe you're out of town, whatever." And then I'll give them one more shot. So I think people don't like to ignore you 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
I think that people don't feel a lot of guilt hitting delete once. But when you show that much enthusiasm and persistence, I think people feel a little guilty. So I take advantage of that.
As you should.
Yeah.
Well, given the sort of broad attempts at contacting people, was there anything that you wanted to investigate for this book but didn't end up being able to?
Besides the tiger penises.
Yes.
Besides the tiger penises. And the tiger penises, yeah, I've got to have a lot of fun with them just because every single interview, somehow they come up. Yes, there's plenty of things. For every book, there's the back of the file cabinet drawer, at least 5 or 6 files of things I thought I would write about and then didn't. Usually because the thing I thought that I was going to go do, I couldn't go do it. I wanted to include a Canada goose chapter because people complain about Canada geese endlessly and their only crime is pooping.
You did have a very entertaining footnote about that.
Yes, thank you. Yes, I outdid myself with the goose poop footnote. Yes, the Canada goose fecal smear campaign. Yes, that was hilarious reporting that. But I had originally wanted to get trained as an egg addler. This is a population reduction technique for Canada geese, where you would take the egg and shake it so it's non-viable. And then you put it back in the nest. It's like a fake. You're duping the Canada goose. The goose is like sitting on this egg thinking, la, 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 and it never hatches. Just kind of a nasty trick, but better than killing the goose, which is what often happens instead. So it appealed to me, this process of learning to be an Adler, because first of all, the technique, it's very specific. You must first be sure that the embryo isn't far enough along that it's going to be inhumane. It's like, it's basically a goose abortion. Who makes the call? Like at what point can we still do this? And the way you figure that out is to put it in a bucket of water. And if it's essentially inside the egg is more air than goose, that's considered okay. It's very tiny. We can go ahead and do this. And so does it float? You have to see. So you're going around like putting eggs in a bucket of water. And meanwhile, the geese they're very aggressive. So they're like come running over at you. So you're supposed to have an umbrella, kind of like the penguin in Batman, where you have this umbrella that you're opening at them to scare them away while you've got your bucket of floating eggs. So the whole thing seemed kind of Marx Brothers comical to me, but hardly anybody does it anymore. I could not find a municipality that was going to be training anybody to do it. I know that they're out there, but I didn't manage to find one that, the timing was critical. There's only a certain time of year, obviously, when you do this. So I failed to, so I didn't include that chapter.
But you did manage to mention Adling though.
Oh, I got that in. Yes, yeah. I did. I managed to get that in there when I was at the Vatican. This is a long story. Yeah, I did. I got it in there. Not in the kind of detail that I had hoped for, but I did. I got it in there.
Kind of jumping off of that question in a different direction, was there anything that you did research that didn't make it into the book that you wanted to, but was cut for length reasons or whatever reason?
Oh, no, there wasn't anything. I usually have more of a problem finding enough good stuff to fill a book. It's not like I end up exceeding my word limit and having to cut anything. So I don't think that's ever happened to me. There have been things that I've gone and reported, not on this book, but there's sometimes when I've gone to report something and it's just not as interesting as I thought it would be. Mm-hmm. I've left it out. So it doesn't happen very often. What happens more often is I think I'm going to cover it, I do some research, and then I bail on it. So hence it becomes one of those folders at the back of the file cabinet drawer. So there's 5 or 6. I wish I'm not near my filing cabinet, or I would tell you. I was thinking about wild boar. Wild boars are a big problem in the US, at least. Nutria, we have nutria, which are these aquatic rodents. Very similar to beavers, which are also rodents. I did not know that. So that I was going to do because I was interested in the Fish and Wildlife Department has a technique to find these creatures, especially when you get down to the last few elusive ones that are not stepping into the trap. They'll do a technique called the Judas nutria, where they take one nutria and they put a tracking device on it, a collar. It looks kind of like a pearl necklace. It's quite lovely. So they put it on this nutria and they send the nutria out because they're social animals. And this nutria will lead them to the other nutria. So this nutria wearing pearls betrays the other nutria. It's called a Judas nutria. And I liked the sound of that. And I thought, I'll do a nutria chapter because nutria are kind of a weird, it's like kind of a lot of interesting things to write about these large rodents. But the whole Judas nutria, the collar didn't, I kept calling every few weeks. The Fish and Wildlife Department finally said, the collar's not working. It doesn't stay on. I don't know if it didn't stay on the nutria. Sometimes if an animal's neck is fatter than its head, the collars slip right off. I'm not sure if that's a problem sometimes I think with bears, but they wasn't happening. Mm-hmm. Wasn't happening. So no nutrias.
You mentioned trying to find enough interesting things to include for the book. Is that sort of how you expanded to plants? Because, the name of the book is Fuzz, but there are several chapters about trees and things.
There were 2. Yeah, that's because the original title was Animal Vegetable Criminal.
Is that still the UK title?
It is still the UK title. Yes, it is. And it would still be the title here, except that Mark Bittman, who is the New York Times, or I don't know if he still is, but he's a pretty big food writer. There's a major cookbook. I forget what it's called, but anyway, he's a big name, and he put out a book right around the time my production process was reaching the end and we were getting ready to, the book was going to be designed soon. He put out this book. It was a history of food called Animal Vegetable Junk, which is, I have to say, not as catchy as Animal Vegetable Criminal. I mean, if you're playing off Animal Vegetable Mineral, junk is just kind of clunky. I mean, no offense to Mr. Bittman. But anyway, so my publisher called and said, we have a problem. This is going to be confusing. Our sales reps are just taking your book out to meet with vendors and the bookstore people. And they're going to think, first of all, that I copied Mark Bittman, which I didn't, because it was on the book proposal that way, or very close to when I think it was Fuzz, and then it was Animal Vegetable Criminal, and then it went back to Fuzz. Anyway, so that's what happened. And because it was Animal Vegetable Criminal, my editor felt like you really definitely have to have, I'd had the trees in there, the danger trees. And I thought that would be enough to justify the word vegetable. And she was like, Mary, we need more vegetable material. So that's how the beans got in there. And then when Mark Bittman's book came out, I said, we are not taking the beans back out. I put them in at the last minute at her request. It was late in the game, and I was like, I've got to report another vegetable chapter and write it up. So we just left it in, much to the puzzlement of people and the scorn of some reviewers.
But then we got the gem title, Terror Beans, which is my favorite thing.
The Terror Beans, exactly. I ended up, and that was the one chapter I've reported during COVID when I couldn't go anywhere. So you'll notice that one, unlike most of the others, I don't go anywhere for that chapter, and that's because of COVID.
If it hadn't been for COVID, were there like people that you wanted to talk to and places that you wanted to go for that?
For that chapter? Not for that one, no. I might have tried harder to find some place to go, some other chapter, but as it was, I knew I wasn't going anywhere, and that one seemed kind of, it was intriguing enough for me to settle down and just do it. But yeah, if I could have gone somewhere, I probably would have kept looking. I just didn't have a lot of time, because it was very much the end of the production time. I usually have the luxury of a little more time.
We often ask fiction writers, how different is the final project from your first draft? And that's not exactly the right question to ask you. So were there any other major changes or revisions that this book went through besides vegetable?
the addition of vegetable material. Yeah, my editor's like, Mary, what about weeds? I'm like, Jill, you're seriously asking me to write a chapter about weeds? And I actually did. That's how I found the U.S. government most wanted list. There's basically a most wanted list for plants. I think I mentioned it anyway. But other than the last minute addition of vegetable matter, no, not anything major. Often, it's just a quirk of my editor, who is wonderful. And I've had the same editor for every book, which I think is rare these days or ever. She will often be very focused on the first chapter, because obviously that's the first thing people read. And in many cases, the only thing people read. People put books down. They read a few pages and they decide they're going to read it, and then they buy it, and then they never go any further. So she's very focused on the first chapter. And so sometimes she'll ask me to pull a chapter from halfway through and start with that for various different reasons. So that sometimes happens, which is stressful for a day. And then I go, okay, she's probably right. So that's the most major thing I've ever had to do. But there's a lot of, from first draft to final product, there's quite a few changes. You find things when you're fact checking, the copy editor finds little things. And also when you get a first draft back, you have the opportunity to futz with it, and you always do. You turn it in, you're like, good, I'm done. I don't ever want to read this book again. I don't even want to look at it again. I'm so done. And then a couple months go by, your editor finally gets it back to you, and you haven't looked at it in a while, and you go over it again. You're like, and this is my last chance to make it good. And you end up doing a fair amount yourself. Speaking for myself, not things that my editor has flagged or asked me to change, but things that I just decided I'm not sure about that. I don't know. I don't think I need more here, or I need less here, or this is not funny, or whatever.
One of the things that I really appreciate about your books, well, Stiff is the other book of yours that I've read, is how deeply researched they are, not just in terms of going out and talking to people, but also in terms of like, you have, all of the references to back up everything. How much of your time is spent doing like in the field research versus like document research for a book?
A lot of time is spent tracking down and stalking the people that are going to be in the book. That's a part that nobody really thinks about. And that can be months of, first of all, trying to get the lay of the land. What is out there? Where might I go? A lot of just poking around on the internet to see, what exists in this world, in this little corner of science. A lot of calling people, a lot of just looking around on the internet. So that, and if you include that as part of the research, that's a huge part of it. When I actually go somewhere in the field, it's often a day or two. Every now and then it's a week or over a week, but for the most part, it's a day or two plus travel. So, and the supplementary stuff, the kind of, filling in that takes some time, but not as much as that. I really think the figuring out what all I'm going to, what's going to be in this book and where am I going and who's going to be in it. Because unless I have that pinned down in a good way, unless I have that set up, it doesn't matter how good my reporting is or my writing. It's just not going to be interesting. It's not going to be funny. It's not going to be fresh. So that takes up a surprising amount of my work. The journals, there's definitely reading journals and, reading articles and making supplemental calls to researchers and people who aren't the key people. There's definitely a bunch of that, but I'd say it's about on a par with the going somewhere. But then there's that chunk that nobody talks about. The where am I going to go? What am I going to do part? What's the best thing I could figure out that would make this, this narrative framework on which I can hang the facts and information.
When you are in the field, how do you document it? I can't imagine you're running around with a tape recorder. Do you take notes? Do you record things at the end of the day, or are you?
I am running around with a tape recorder. It's small. It's smaller than my phone. It's a little Olympus digital recorder. So it's not always on because my God, then I'd have 20 hours to listen to, because I do my own transcribing. I don't use a transcription service. I think if you're doing a phone interview, that works fine. But when you're in the field, when there's lots of other noise and you have to struggle sometimes to make out what people are saying, I prefer to listen to it myself and transcribe it. So I have it on. I think I come back with 3 or 4 hours of material on a research trip at the most. But I'm taking notes too. I'm also taking notes on what I'm seeing and hearing, et cetera.
So do you have to, you have everyone's permission when you're in the field, obviously, to be there. So is that just part of that request that you will also be recording, or?
Oh, yeah. I'm holding the tape recorder, so they know. On the phone, you're supposed to tell people. Mm-hmm. I do that, but I don't do it. I'll just say, oh, hang on, I'm going to turn on my machine. Sometimes I'll say, I'm going to be recording this. Is that okay? But half the time I forget. But I do let them know in some way. But in the field, I just figure
they can see it.
They can see the tape recorder. I'm going to let them figure it out.
What were you most surprised to learn over the course of the writing and research for this book?
Well, it was all pretty surprising to me. First of all, I was surprised to learn that there's an entire field of science called human-wildlife conflict. That there are textbooks and conferences and professionals and people with names like bear manager and human-elephant conflict expert. And
I do wish that my job title was that interesting.
Same here. Totally. I just was talking to someone recently who was like head of pig engineering. Yeah, I guess what surprised me, I think just the difficulty of all of these, all of these conflicts, they have their own, depends on the species involved. It depends on what the animals are doing. It depends on the politics of the people in the community. It's never simple. And that makes it actually more interesting because sometimes people will go, you got a problem with bears? Just get bear resistant garbage cans. Done deal. But okay, let's dive into that. Let's go to Aspen. Let's see what's really going on. It's like, yes, there's legislature. You must have bear resistant garbage cans, but are they used? Are they locked? And when they're not locked, who's going to write the fine? And does it go to which restaurant who's using this communal dumpster, or which person in this 6 condo building, who left it open, who gets the fine? And then how do you get the garbage companies on board with, they're going to have to retrofit their trucks if you buy bear resistant containers. Like, it's never simple. It seems like it'd be simple. It seems like this shouldn't be a problem, but it's such a big problem because you can't sit down with the bears and go, look, we can't have you this close to people. You got to stay out of the trash can. Just stay away from people's houses, okay? And you'll be fine. We can't have that conversation. So, and in India, it was so interesting with monkeys. When the monkeys are a pain in the ass, these monkeys in the cities, and not just the cities, countryside too, but they get into a lot of mischief, basically. So people want them. They want the problem to stop. They want the monkeys to go away, but because of the religion there, because Hanuman is a Hindu god, appears as a monkey, nobody wants to take the job as a monkey catcher. Nobody wants to be perceived as harming or harassing monkeys. Nobody wants them hurt. They're against anything you propose, even birth control. So the poor people who, and I spoke to these guys who are in the veterinary services of New Delhi, and they're like, what do? We can't hire monkey catchers to take them down to this preserve. Nobody wants to keep the job. The monkeys get out because, the walls weren't made properly. So it's both hilarious and surprisingly complicated. And I guess that being surprising was the thing that surprised me.
Oh, the monkey birth control was fascinating.
Yes, it was. And again, you'd think, well, just give those damn primates some birth control. Well, let's think about that. These are wild, free-ranging animals. And with birth control, if it has to be taken orally, as we all know, you have to do it regularly. And how do you get this population, like this same troop of monkeys, to keep coming back and taking this bait? How do you know they're taking it? And how do you know that some other species that you don't want to control isn't taking the bait? How's that work? It doesn't work very well. So, you talk about immunocontraception, that's like a vaccine, but you have to have a booster. So that means rounding them up, figuring out who's had the first shot, and who hasn't. So it's just not, it's never easy.
We touched on this a little bit earlier with the goose fecal smear campaign, but I was wondering if you would talk a little bit about how you incorporate humor to make science writing more accessible.
Oh, sure. Well, I'm part of that is, and I talked about the time that I spend kind of stalking the people that I want to be in the book. One of the things that I have in the back of my head is, will this reporting trip, this visit, will it yield some material that I can present in a way that has humor? Not that the person is funny necessarily, not that I'm going to be making fun of what they do, absolutely not. But the humor might come from, say, just the juxtaposition of myself and what I'm reporting on, how out of place I am, or how lost I am, or my inability to kind of grasp something that should be really obvious. So I try to, I may poke fun at myself, or sometimes just what's going on is pleasantly bizarre and funny. That is definitely an element that I'm looking for up front when I'm deciding what to cover. Some things just don't seem like they're going to have that potential. And that's okay. There are definitely chapters in my book that aren't full of humor. I'm trying to have a bit of a mix, like a few things that I know will be kind of fun and funny, and some things that will be less so. And the footnotes are often just tangents that I go off on. They don't fit into the narrative, but I can't bear to leave them out, so I throw them in a footnote. The footnotes, I think, are where a lot of the funniest parts are. I think the way to get it wrong is to try to force it. If something's not funny, if there's not really room for humor, don't force it. And that's where my editor comes in. Sometimes she'll just cross something out and go, no. Like if I'm just trying too hard or something's just inappropriate. You can't force it. All you can do is try to set yourself up for situations that might be funny. That's why in writing the monkey chapter, one of the things, well, not that that's all that funny, but I wanted to experience what it was like to be mugged by an animal. And so I went up this trail in Bundi, which is a small city in India, and up towards this old fort where I knew there were a lot of monkeys. And I went up and I had a bag of bananas. I was asking for it. So, because I wanted that experience. I knew it would be fun to write it up. So part of it is putting myself in situations that I know or that I hope will generate some material that's fun to play with.
I have to say, reading that scene, one of the things about the monkeys is that they also took expensive items because they knew people would trade food to get them back.
Yes.
And I kept expecting you to say that the camera person who was following you had their camera taken.
I thought she was holding her phone so tight and like up high.
Yeah.
But she was nervous about that, which is why she took stills. I'm like, you took stills? You didn't take video? She's like, I don't know. I just was trying to get something and not have my camera stolen.
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought that she thought that too, that might happen. Yeah.
Are there any places that you visited in this book or in any of your research that you've gone back later just for enjoyment?
I am this month going to I forget the name, but it's a wildlife fertility conference. And part of the reason I'm going, I'm doing a talk. It's an in-conversation thing. It's not like a formal lecture, but they wanted me to come do this. And part of the reason was that a bunch of people from Colorado will be there, people that I met while I was doing the book, and I'm looking forward to seeing them because I've kept in touch with a couple of them. So that'll be fun. I have not been back out with Justin Dellinger, but he did invite me. He's like, anytime you want to go trekking mountain lions, just let me know. I think he was just being nice. I think the last thing on earth he'd want is another day with Mary Roach. But it was really tempting because it's an amazing thing to go and do, to be with somebody who knows how to track like that.
Sounded incredible.
Yeah, it was amazing. Just to be able to read a landscape like that. I mean, 100% of that stuff I would have walked right by or over. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now I haven't been back to the Vatican, haven't been to New Zealand. Well, of course, New Zealand would be a beautiful place to go back to.
I did have that same, when you had your note about possum wool, I had that same thought of, oh no, I didn't realize that was how the wool was collected, because I have possum wool gloves as well.
I know. I mean, I still wear them. I love those gloves, but and I'm like, oh, so they shear them once a year? And the guy looks at me like, no, they're not sheared ever. No, it's sliped. I was like, I don't think I want to know what sliping is. I was like, no, you don't. But yeah, it's wool. You figure that, they spin it, they shear them and they spin it.
It's a renewable resource.
Exactly.
Well, the possums are.
Yeah. Possums are highly renewable.
Was there anything that we didn't talk about that you want to discuss about this book?
No, it was really fun. These were some questions I don't get that often about the process. And I love to talk about that because it's what I do and it's interesting. So it's fun to talk about. So thank you.
Thank you.
So first off, Mary, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast to talk about Fuzz with us. This has just been absolutely wonderful. Before we give you your evening back, if there is anything you can tell us about your current projects, if you're working on anything, we'd love to hear it. But after that, where can our listeners find you on the internet?
Well, I am working on another book. I'm not really talking about what it's about, but it is, it's another fun nonfiction. Won't be fiction. Nonfiction book. So that's a happy place for me. My books are available. Well, you can go to maryroach.net. There's excerpts from and table of contents, so you can get a good sense of what each one is about. There's 7 of them now, apparently. Wow. I'm on Twitter at Mary_Roach. And the books, you can find them in bookstores. In particular, the Fuzz is easier to find. There's also Packing for Mars for Kids, which is my first book for young readers, just came out.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Well, thank you again so much. This has been a blast. Like we said at the beginning, an excellent change of pace for us.
Well, thank you for taking a different path. I really appreciate word bombing your fiction podcast. I appreciate the opportunity because, as I said, I think of myself as writing nonfiction for people who don't like nonfiction. So that is to say, people who prefer fiction, and I am one of those. So it's great to be on. Thanks, you guys.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a great evening. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fiction Fans.
Come disagree with us. We're on Twitter and Instagram at FictionFansPod. You can also email us at fictionfanspod@gmail.com.
If you enjoyed the episode, please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And follow us wherever your podcasts live.
Thanks again for listening, and may your villains always be defeated. Bye.
Bye.